The auction block was slick with blood when I realized the trembling girl they were selling was my sister. 3 men lay dead at my feet, their guns still smoking in the dusty afternoon air. The auctioneer's hammer had fallen silent, replaced by the screaming of terrified townsfolk scrambling for cover behind overturned wagons. My Colt .45 felt hot in my hand, the acrid smell of gunpowder burning my nostrils as I stared at the wooden platform where she stood, 15 years old, thin as a rail, with the same green eyes that haunted my nightmares for 7 years. Sarah, my baby sister, the one I'd watched die in that Apache raid. The girl's hands were bound with rough rope, her cotton dress torn and stained with trail dust. She wasn't looking at the carnage around her feet. She was looking straight at me, those familiar eyes wide with recognition and something else. Hope. The kind of hope that gets people killed in this godforsaken territory. You done killed 3 of my best buyers, stranger. The auctioneer's voice cracked as he pressed a blood-soaked handkerchief to his shoulder where my second bullet had grazed him. That girl's still gotta be sold. Got debts to pay. The rage burning in my chest threatened to consume what little sanity I had left. My finger twitched on the trigger, itching to put a bullet between his yellow teeth. But killing him wouldn't get Sarah out of those ropes. Wouldn't get her away from the dozen other buyers still circling like vultures, their greedy eyes calculating whether she was worth dying for. How much? My voice came out as a growl, barely human. Starting bid's $50, but seeing as you just shot up my merchandise venue, I'm thinking you owe me double that just for... I fired a shot into the wooden beam above his head, sending splinters raining down on his balding scalp. How much for the girl? His Adam's apple bobbed as he swallowed hard. Bidding starts at 50. But Crenshaw, there's already offered 200. He nodded toward a thick-set man in an expensive suit who was wiping blood spatter from his spectacles. And Morrison's good for 300 if she's untouched. Morrison. I knew that name. Ran a string of brothels from El Paso to Santa Fe, specialized in young girls who'd lost their families to Indian raids. The kind of man who deserved a slow death and a shallow grave. But this story begins 3 days earlier, when I rode into Tombstone with nothing but vengeance on my mind and $1,700 in stolen gold burning a hole in my saddlebags. I'd been tracking the Garrett gang for 6 months, following their trail of burned homesteads and murdered families across half of Arizona territory. They'd taken something from me once, or so I thought, and I'd made it my life's work to take everything from them. The gold was their latest score, lifted from a Wells Fargo shipment outside Tucson. I'd killed 4 of them getting it back, but their leader, Marcus Garrett, had slipped away like smoke in the wind. That's when I heard about the auction. Word was spreading through every saloon and trading post from here to the Mexico border. Garrett was liquidating his assets before disappearing for good. Horses, weapons, stolen goods, and other things. Things that made decent folks turn away and pretend they hadn't heard. I'd planned to find Garrett there, put a bullet in his brain, and ride off into the sunset with my conscience finally clear. What I hadn't planned on was seeing Sarah's face staring back at me from that auction block, 7 years after I'd buried what I thought were her charred remains. The auctioneer was talking again, his voice high and nervous. Like I said, we got procedures here. Bidding starts at 50, goes up in increments of $500. The words left my mouth before I could stop them. A murmur rippled through the remaining crowd. Morrison stepped forward, his cold eyes fixed on mine. You're that gunslinger been hunting the Garrett boys. Heard you killed young Billy Garrett up in Phoenix. Among others? He smiled, showing teeth stained brown from years of tobacco. Well then, you know the value of what you're looking at. That particular girl's got special qualities, worth far more than 500 to the right buyer. His gaze crawled over Sarah like she was a piece of meat. I'll bid 800. The rope around Sarah's wrists was cutting into her skin. I could see the fear in her eyes, but also something else, a quiet strength that reminded me of our mother. She wasn't broken yet, despite whatever hell she'd endured. But men like Morrison specialized in breaking spirits along with everything else. $1,000. My voice carried across the dusty square like a death sentence. Crenshaw removed his spectacles and polished them slowly. You got that kind of money, stranger? Because if you're bluffing, we got ways of collecting debts around here. I reached into my saddlebags and pulled out a leather pouch heavy with gold coins. The sound of metal clinking against metal made every eye in the square focus on me like a rifle scope. Got this and more. Question is, who's fool enough to bid against it? Morrison's smile widened, and I saw his hand drift toward the gun on his hip. Morrison's hand froze halfway to his gun when he saw the cold steel in my eyes. He'd heard the stories, same as everyone else in the territory. How I'd walked into a saloon in Yuma and put 6 men in the ground before they could clear leather. How I'd tracked the Garrett gang through Apache country for 3 months without losing their trail once. What Morrison didn't know was that every man I'd killed had Sarah's blood on his hands. $1,200. Morrison's voice was steady, but I caught the slight tremor in his fingers as he reached for his own money pouch. And that's more than this scrawny thing's worth. But I got a reputation to maintain. The auctioneer's eyes gleamed with greed. He could smell the money flowing like water, probably more than he'd see in a year of normal business. Excellent bid from Mr. Morrison. Do I hear 13? I studied Sarah's face, looking for any sign that she recognized me. 7 years was a long time, especially for a child who'd been 8 when I last saw her. But there was something in the way she held her chin up, the stubborn set of her jaw that was pure family trait. Our pa had the same look right before he'd charge headfirst into trouble. 1,500. The words tasted like ashes in my mouth. This wasn't how a man should buy back his sister's freedom. But the world had gone to hell long before I'd arrived in it. And sometimes you had to work within the devil's own rules. Crenshaw stepped forward, his expensive boots clicking on the wooden platform. Now hold on there, boys. I've been in this business longer than both of you combined, and I know quality when I see it. He walked closer to Sarah, studying her like she was a prize horse. This one's got breeding. Look at those hands, soft, educated. She can read and write, I'd wager. That's worth a premium in certain establishments. Sarah flinched when he reached toward her face, but she didn't look away. Instead, she spit directly into his eyes. The crowd gasped. Crenshaw stumbled backward, wiping his face with a silk handkerchief, his cheeks flushed red with humiliation. You little... He raised his hand to strike her, but I put a bullet through his wrist before his palm could connect with her cheek. He screamed and fell to his knees, clutching his shattered bones while blood seeped between his fingers. Anybody else want to put hands on the merchandise before it's sold? My Colt was still smoking as I swept it across the remaining bidders. Because I got 5 more bullets in a real short temper. The auctioneer was practically bouncing with excitement. Spirited. Yes, very spirited. That adds to the value considerably. Mr. Morrison, your response to 1,500? Morrison was calculating odds in his head. I could see it in his eyes. He was wondering if the profit margin was worth risking a gunfight with a man who'd just proven his accuracy under pressure. Smart money said no. But greed made men stupid, and Morrison had built his empire on taking what he wanted regardless of the cost. $2,000. Morrison's voice was flat, emotionless. Final offer. 2,000. More than I had, even with the stolen gold. I'd need to find another way, and finding another way meant Sarah would disappear into Morrison's network of brothels and gambling houses. I'd spend the rest of my life knowing I'd found her and lost her again because I'd been $50 short. Unless I was willing to bet everything on a different kind of currency. I don't got 2,000 in gold, I said slowly, making sure every word carried across the square. But I got something worth more than money to the right buyer. Morrison laughed, a harsh sound like grinding glass. Nothing's worth more than gold, stranger. Nothing you got, anyway. I reached into my vest pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper, yellowed with age and worn soft from handling. Every man in the square knew what it was before I unfolded it. A wanted poster. My wanted poster. Jake Sullivan, I said, reading my own name off the paper. Wanted dead or alive for bank robbery, murder, cattle rustling, and assaulting federal officers. Reward, $3,000. The silence stretched like a taut rope ready to snap. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. You're Jake Sullivan. Morrison's voice was barely a whisper. The Tombstone Killer. Was. Been retired from that line of work for 2 years now. I folded the poster and tucked it back in my vest. But I imagined Sheriff Dawson would be real interested to know where to find me. Especially if someone was to tell him I'd be at the old Spanish mission tomorrow at sundown, alone and unarmed. Morrison's pupils dilated. $3,000 was more money than he'd make off Sarah in 5 years, even working her to death. But it came with a catch. He'd have to survive long enough to collect it. You're offering yourself? Morrison's tongue darted across his lips. Your life for hers? My freedom for hers. There's a difference. I met Sarah's eyes across the dusty space between us. Some things are worth more than staying alive. The auctioneer cleared his throat nervously. I'm not sure we can accept that kind of payment. There are legal considerations. Morrison silenced him with a gesture. I accept. The girl for Jake Sullivan's location, guaranteed delivery to Sheriff Dawson. Then we got a deal. I holstered my Colt and stepped toward the platform. But I take her now. You get your payment tomorrow. Morrison's hand twitched toward his gun again. How do I know you won't just disappear? I smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Because Jake Sullivan never broke his word. Even when keeping it meant walking straight into hell. The moment I cut the ropes from Sarah's wrists, she collapsed against me like a rag doll. 7 years of hell had carved hollows under her cheekbones and left scars on her arms that told stories I didn't want to hear. But when she looked up at me, I saw the same little girl who used to braid flowers in her hair and sing lullabies to her corn-husk dolls. Jake? Her voice was barely a whisper, cracked from thirst and disuse. Is it really you? I wanted to sweep her up in my arms and ride hard for the Mexico border. Instead, I kept my face stone-cold neutral as Morrison's men formed a semicircle around us. Yeah, Sarah, it's me. She started to cry then, silent tears that cut tracks through the dust on her cheeks. I'd seen grown men weep before, usually right before I killed them. But Sarah's tears hit me like physical blows. Each drop was an accusation, a reminder of how completely I'd failed her. Morrison stepped closer, his eyes gleaming with triumph. Touching reunion. Now, about our arrangement. Tomorrow at sundown. I cut him off. Spanish mission, like I said. But the girl comes with me now. I don't think so. Morrison's smile revealed those stained teeth again. She stays here as collateral, to ensure you don't get any ideas about breaking our deal. My hand drifted to my gun, but Morrison was ready for it. 3 of his men already had iron pointed at my chest, and more were spreading out to cover all the angles. Smart positioning, professional. You got trust issues, Morrison? I got business sense. The girl stays until Sheriff Dawson confirms your identity tomorrow. He gestured to his men. Take her to the hotel. Lock her in the back room upstairs. Post guards. Sarah's fingers dug into my arm like claws. Don't leave me, Jake. Please, not again. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. Not again. She remembered everything. The Apache raid, the burning homestead, me riding away to track her supposed killers while she was being dragged off in chains. 7 years she'd been waiting for me to come back, and I'd been hunting ghosts while she lived in hell. I ain't leaving you, I told her, meaning every word. But I gotta play this smart, or we both end up dead. Morrison snapped his fingers, and 2 of his men moved toward Sarah. She pressed herself against my side, her whole body trembling like a leaf in a windstorm. Easy now, little dove, one of Morrison's thugs said, reaching for her arm. Nobody's gonna hurt you. You just... Sarah bit down on his wrist so hard I heard bone crunch. The man screamed and jerked backward, blood streaming between his fingers. Before anyone could react, she'd snatched the knife from his belt and pressed it to her own throat. I'll kill myself before I go back in that room, she said, and her voice was steady as bedrock. I swear to God I will. The square went dead silent. Even Morrison looked uncertain for the first time since I'd met him. Sarah's green eyes found mine across the space between us. Tell them, Jake. Tell them what Papa used to say about dying free. I felt something cold settle in my chest. She was giving me a choice. Let Morrison take her, or watch her cut her own throat rather than spend another night as someone's property. Either way, I'd lose her again. But at least one way would be her choice. Better to die on your feet than live on your knees, I said quietly. Morrison's face went purple. Put the knife down, you crazy little. Back off, I warned him, my own gun clearing leather faster than lightning. All of you, back the hell off. But Morrison was beyond reason now, seeing his profit margin bleeding away along with his man's chewed wrist. Shoot them both. I'll collect the bounty on Sullivan and cut my losses on the girl. The first shot came from my left, one of Morrison's men trying to wing me without hitting Sarah. I put 2 bullets in his chest before he could fire a second time. The sound of gunfire echoed off the buildings like thunder. And suddenly, the square was chaos again. Sarah dropped to the ground as bullets started flying, still clutching the knife. I stepped over her, my gun spitting fire and death in both directions. Morrison's men were good, but they weren't gunfighters. They were muscle, used to intimidating unarmed civilians and breaking legs for unpaid debts. I was something different entirely. The fight lasted maybe 30 seconds. When the smoke cleared, 4 more of Morrison's men were feeding the desert soil with their blood. Morrison himself was pressed against a water trough, his fancy suit torn and his face white as bone. This wasn't the deal, he gasped, clutching a shoulder wound that was bleeding freely. You gave your word. Deal changed when you decided to shoot at my sister. I reloaded my Colts with practiced efficiency, never taking my eyes off him. New deal is this. You forget you ever saw either of us, and I let you live long enough to bleed to death slow and natural-like. Sarah was on her feet now, the knife still gripped in her white knuckles. Jake, there's something you need to know. About why they took me. About who's been hunting you. Morrison's laugh was wet with blood. Tell him, little dove. Tell him about Marcus Garrett. Tell him about the real reason his family died. My blood turned to ice water. Marcus Garrett, the one man from the gang I'd never been able to catch. The one who'd always stayed one step ahead, like he knew exactly where I'd be and when. What's he talking about, Sarah? Her green eyes were full of pain and terrible knowledge. Marcus Garrett didn't just raid our farm by accident, Jake. He came looking for you specifically. Said you'd killed his brother in that bank job up in Colorado. Said he was going to make you watch your family burn before he put a bullet in your head. The world tilted sideways. Tommy Garrett. I remembered him now. Young kid, maybe 16, who'd gotten himself shot during my last robbery before I'd tried to go straight. I'd thought he was just another casualty of the outlaw life. But you weren't there, Sarah continued, her voice breaking. You'd ridden out that morning to check the cattle? So Garrett took me instead. Said he'd use me to draw you out when the time was right. Morrison was still laughing, blood bubbling on his lips. 7 years he's been planning this, Sullivan. 7 years of keeping your sister alive, just so he could dangle her in front of you when he was ready to finish what he started. A new voice cut through the afternoon air like a blade. And that time is now, Jake. I turned around slowly, already knowing what I'd see. Marcus Garrett stood at the edge of the square, flanked by 6 riders with rifles trained on us. His face was older, scarred by wind and sun, but his eyes were the same cold black I remembered. Hello, little brother, he called out to Sarah, his voice carrying clearly across the blood-soaked ground. Did you miss me? Marcus Garrett looked exactly like the devil I'd been hunting for 7 years. Tall, lean, with silver threading through his black hair and a smile that promised slow death. His 6 riders spread out in a perfect ambush formation, rifles gleaming in the afternoon sun like the teeth of some massive predator. You always were predictable, Jake, Garrett said, dismounting with the easy grace of a man who'd spent his life in the saddle. I put word out about an auction, and here you come running like a dog to a dinner bell. Sarah moved closer to me, the knife still trembling in her hand. He's been planning this for months, Jake. Every time we moved camps, every job they pulled, it was all designed to draw you out. My mind was racing, calculating angles and distances. 6 rifles against 2 handguns, and Sarah caught in the crossfire. The math didn't work in our favor, not even close. But Marcus Garrett had made one crucial mistake. He'd gotten between me and the only person left in this world who mattered. Funny thing about revenge, I said, keeping my voice steady while my fingers loosened the thongs on my gun holsters. Sometimes it becomes the only thing keeping a man alive. Take that away, and he's got nothing left to lose. Garrett laughed, a sound like breaking glass. Oh, I'm not taking it away, Jake. I'm giving you more than you ever dreamed of. He gestured toward Sarah with his rifle barrel. 7 years I kept her fed and breathing just for this moment. 7 years of watching you stumble around the territory like a blind man, always one step behind. The rage building in my chest was white hot now, threatening to consume what little tactical thinking I had left. But Sarah's presence beside me kept me grounded. She'd survived 7 years of hell because she'd been smart, careful, patient. I owed her the same consideration. What do you want, Garrett? What I've always wanted, to watch you suffer before you die. His black eyes flicked to Sarah. The girls served her purpose, but I figure she might have one more use left in her. He nodded to one of his men, a scarred giant with arms like tree trunks. The man started walking toward us, his rifle trained on Sarah's chest. Don't, I warned, my hand hovering over my Colt. Don't make me kill you all. Garrett's smile widened. Kill us all? Jake, you always did think too highly of your abilities. You're fast, I'll give you that. But you ain't faster than 6 rifles at once. The scarred man was 10 feet away now, close enough that I could see the yellow teeth in his grin. Come along, girlie. Time to finish what we started. Sarah took a step backward, pressing against my side. I won't go with him, Jake. I'd rather die right here. Nobody's dying except the people who deserve it, I told her. But even as I said it, I was running scenarios in my head. 6 men, maybe 7 if Morrison was still breathing behind that water trough. Too many angles to cover, too many ways for Sarah to catch a stray bullet. The scarred man reached out toward Sarah's arm. Easy now, girl. Don't make this harder than... Sarah moved like lightning, driving the knife deep into his wrist. He howled and jerked backward, dark blood spurting across the dusty ground. In the split second of confusion that followed, I drew both guns and started shooting. My first 2 shots took down the riders on either end of Garrett's line. The third caught the man next to the scarred giant in the shoulder, spinning him around like a child's top. But return fire was already coming my way, bullets whining past my ears like angry hornets. I grabbed Sarah and dove behind an overturned wagon, wood splinters exploding around us as rifle rounds chewed into the makeshift cover. She was pressed against me, her whole body shaking, but her eyes were alert and focused. There's something else, she whispered urgently. About the gold you took from them. It wasn't just any gold, Jake. It was payment for... A bullet punched through the wagon bed inches from her head, cutting off her words. I blind fired over the top of the wagon, more to keep Garrett's men honest than with any hope of hitting them. Payment for what? I demanded. For me, she said, and her voice was steady despite the gunfire. Morrison was just the middleman. Garrett was selling me to him, but the real buyer was someone else. Someone who's been hunting both of us. My blood turned to ice. Who? Before she could answer, I heard Marcus Garrett's voice calling out from somewhere behind the saloon. Jake, you got about 30 seconds before my boys circle around behind you. Come out now and I'll make it quick for both of you. I risked a look around the edge of the wagon. 4 men were still moving out there, working their way closer with the patience of professional killers. The scarred giant was trying to wrap his bleeding wrist with a piece of torn shirt, but his rifle was still ready. Jake? Sarah's voice was urgent now. The buyer isn't from around here. He's from back east. Federal marshal named Hawkins. He's been tracking you since that Colorado job, and he thinks I know where you buried the money from the Denver bank. Federal marshal. That changed everything. If Hawkins was involved, this wasn't just about revenge anymore. This was about a $20,000 bank robbery that had never been solved, and a marshal who'd probably staked his career on bringing me in. Do you? I asked. Know where it's buried? She nodded, her green eyes bright with desperate hope. Papa told me before he died. Made me promise to tell you if anything ever happened to him. It's not money, Jake. It's something worth a lot more than gold. Another volley of rifle fire tore into our cover, and I heard boots moving on the hard-packed earth. Garrett's men were closing in fast, probably 30 seconds away from having us surrounded completely. I checked my ammunition. 4 rounds left in each gun, plus the spare cylinder in my belt. Not nearly enough for what was coming. Sarah, I said, meeting her eyes. I need you to listen very carefully. In about 10 seconds, I'm going to stand up and start shooting. When I do, you run for that building with the red door. Don't look back, don't stop for anything, just run. I'm not leaving you again. You are. I gripped her shoulders, probably harder than I should have. Because if we both die here, then Garrett wins, and I'll be damned if I let that happen after 7 years. She was crying again, but she nodded. The thing Papa hid, it's not just money, Jake. It's proof. Proof about who really planned that Denver job and why they wanted you to take the blame for it. Boots were moving closer now, maybe 15 feet away. I could hear Marcus Garrett giving quiet orders to his men, positioning them for the final assault. Where, Sarah? Where did Papa hide it? The old mine shaft behind our farm, the one where we used to play hide and seek when we were kids. Her voice was barely a whisper. He said if anyone ever came looking for it, they'd have to kill us both to get it. I smiled grimly, feeling something cold and final settle in my chest. Then I guess it's time to go home. I came up shooting like the devil himself, both Colts blazing in the afternoon sun. The first man to round the wagon took 2 bullets center mass before he could even raise his rifle. The second caught one in the throat and went down gurgling his own blood into the dust. Sarah ran like her life depended on it, which it did. I kept shooting, covering her retreat while Garrett's remaining men dove for whatever cover they could find. My third man tried to hide behind a hitching post and learned the hard way that pine wood doesn't stop. The caliber bullets. That left 3 men and Marcus Garrett himself. You always were a stubborn fool, Jake. Garrett's voice echoed from behind the general store. But you can't shoot your way out of this one. I reloaded with practiced speed, my fingers moving by instinct while my eyes tracked movement in the shadows. Sarah had made it to the building with the red door, an old church that had been abandoned since the Apache troubles started. Good thick walls, only one way in or out. She'd be safe there, at least temporarily. Maybe not, I called back, but I can sure as hell try. A rifle cracked from my left, the bullet kicking up dirt at my feet. I spun and put 2 rounds through the saloon window where the muzzle flash had come from. A man's scream told me at least one had found its mark. 2 left, plus Garrett. I started moving, keeping low and using the scattered buildings for cover. The smart play would have been to fort up somewhere defensible and wait for them to come to me. But smart hadn't gotten me this far, and I was done playing it safe. I'd been running from my past for 7 years, and it was time to face it head on. The first man I found was crouched behind a water barrel, trying to get an angle on the church where Sarah was hiding. He never saw me coming. My knife slid between his ribs, quiet as a whisper, and he slumped forward without making a sound. 1 left. Tommy. Garrett's voice was getting desperate now. Report. Tommy wasn't reporting anything to anybody anymore, but I kept that information to myself. Instead, I worked my way around the back of the buildings, moving like an Apache on the hunt. Years of tracking outlaws had taught me how to be patient, how to think like prey and predator both. I found the last rifleman exactly where I expected him, positioned to cover the church door, waiting for Sarah to make a run for it. He was young, maybe 19, with scared eyes and hands that shook slightly on his weapon. Drop the rifle, son, I said from behind him. This doesn't have to be your fight. He spun around, bringing the rifle up fast. Too fast. The barrel caught in his jacket sleeve, and by the time he'd cleared it, my Colt was already pressed against his forehead. I said, drop it. The rifle fell from nerveless fingers. The kid couldn't have been much older than Sarah when Garrett took her. Probably some ranch hand who'd fallen in with bad company and found himself in over his head. Please don't kill me, mister. I got a wife back in Tucson. Baby on the way. Then you better ride hard for Tucson and forget you ever saw this place, I told him. Because if I see you again, having a family won't stop me from putting you in the ground. He didn't need to be told twice. Within 30 seconds, he was on his horse and disappearing into the desert like smoke on the wind, which left just me and Marcus Garrett. I found him in the center of the square, standing over Morrison's body with a smoking rifle in his hands. Morrison's chest had been blown open by a close-range shot, his expensive suit soaked crimson with blood that was already drawing flies. Couldn't have him talking, Garrett explained when he saw me looking. Dead men don't collect bounties or make deals with federal marshals. Speaking of marshals, I said, keeping my guns trained on him. Sarah tells me you got one on the payroll. Hawkins, isn't it? Garrett laughed, but there was no humor in it. Marshal Hawkins has been very helpful, yes. Amazing what a man will do for the right price, especially when that price includes information about where Jake Sullivan's been hiding for 7 years. The pieces were falling into place now, forming a picture uglier than I'd imagined. The Denver job. That wasn't my idea, was it? You set me up from the beginning. Took you long enough to figure it out. Garrett's rifle was pointed at the ground, but I knew he was fast. 20,000 in gold, Jake. More money than any of us had ever seen, but it was never about the money. Then what? Respectability. He spit the word like it tasted bad. Hawkins wanted to be the marshal who brought in the infamous Jake Sullivan. I wanted revenge for Tommy. The bank wanted their insurance money. Everybody got what they wanted. Except me and Sarah. Except you and Sarah, he agreed. But that's about to change. His rifle came up fast, faster than I'd expected. But I'd been ready for it, had been ready for it for 7 years. My first shot took him in the shoulder, spinning him around. The second caught him in the chest, dropping him to his knees. He looked down at the spreading blood stain on his shirt, then back up at me. You think this ends it? I walked closer, my Colt steady in my hand. I think it ends you. That'll do for a start. Hawkins, still coming, and he's bringing friends. Garrett coughed, blood speckling his lips. Federal marshals, Jake. Whole damn posse. They'll be here by tomorrow. Then I guess we better not be here tomorrow. His laugh turned into a death rattle. Where are you gonna run? Mexico? They got agreements now. Canada. Too far, and winter's coming. He leaned forward, his eyes still holding that malicious gleam. Face it, Jake, you're a dead man walking. Only question is, how many people die with you? I put the final bullet through his forehead, silencing him forever. Marcus Garrett pitched backward into the dust, his blood mixing with Morrison's and half a dozen others. The square looked like a slaughterhouse, but it was finally quiet. Sarah appeared in the doorway of the church, moving carefully across the body-strewn ground until she reached me. She didn't flinch when she saw Garrett's corpse, just studied his face for a long moment. Is it over? She asked. This part is. But Garrett was right about one thing. We can't stay here. I holstered my guns and took her hand. Time to go home, Sarah. Time to dig up the past and see what Papa really left us. As we walked toward my horse, I felt something I hadn't experienced in 7 years. Hope. Not the desperate, clawing kind that gets men killed, but the quiet, steady kind that keeps them alive long enough to see tomorrow. Sarah squeezed my hand. Thank you for keeping your promise, Jake. Thank you for coming back for me. I never broke a promise to family, I told her, and I'm not about to start now. We rode through the night toward the old family farm, Sarah's arms wrapped tight around my waist as we pushed my horse hard across the desert. Behind us, Tombstone burned with the news of what had happened in the square. Ahead lay the ruins of our childhood home and whatever secret Papa had hidden in that mine shaft. By dawn, we'd found it. Not just the 20,000 in gold that everyone thought I'd stolen. but something far more valuable. Documents in Papa's careful handwriting detailing how Marshall Hawkins and a corrupt banker had orchestrated the whole Denver job. How they'd needed a fall guy, and Jake Sullivan fit the bill perfectly. Sarah read the papers by morning light, her green eyes bright with tears and something fiercer, justice. He never stopped believing in you, Jake. Even after everyone said you'd gone bad, Papa knew you were still the same man who used to sing us to sleep. When Hawkins arrived with his federal posse 3 days later, he found an empty town and a stack of evidence that would see him hang for treason, murder, and conspiracy. Sarah and I were long gone by then, riding toward California and new names and a future that finally belonged to us. Some promises are worth keeping, no matter what they cost.